creating a culture of love.
And I think that's where people got to look at their strengths and go back into looking in the mirror and saying, what is my strengths? And maybe I'm not the best at one thing, but if I can put a lot of things together, I can be really great at those things together.
Lewis Howes, lifelong friend. Thank you for coming in.
My man.
I appreciate this. As someone who, looks up to you so much, not only in this space, thank you for coming onto the show.
Yeah, of course.
And, you've been a catalyst for me becoming who I am. So not only do I know you're embodying the school of greatness and standing up for people, but I'm actually a person that experienced it. But at the same time, then it was up to me to continue moving that forward.
Yeah.
And showing up the way I'm showing up. But today, this is about you. We are talking about the greatness mindset, your third book. I'm excited to read it. I'm excited to dive in and really talk about this. But at the end of the day, there's one thing I really want to talk about. We're both creators. We put content out in the world. We show our hearts. And there's this thing that we talk about all the time, which is self-doubt. And there's a quote that you talk about saying that self-doubt is the killer of dreams. So what is it that you do in your space to really start quelling that conversation and trying to move past it?
Well, I think it starts with knowing myself and facing myself in the mirror consistently and seeing what is the greatest fear that holds me back. Because my self-doubt is tied to one of three core fears: the fear of failure, success, and judgment, other people's opinions. And underneath at the root of those fears is somewhere that I am not enough, is a belief that I'm not enough. And it's finding where is the story or the evidence that is telling me I'm not enough, and how can I overcome that belief, that story, that experience? How can I create new meaning around why I don't feel like I'm enough? So I'm a big believer in creating fear lists and creating a list of all your biggest insecurities and fears at each stage and season of life. Because that is the thing that's going to cause you to doubt yourself the most. And when we can look at it and say, okay, I really don't like public speaking, or I really don't feel like I'm vulnerable in certain conversations with family and I don't like to talk about things, or I'm afraid to put my art out into the world, or I'm afraid of what happens when I succeed, then everyone's going to pull something at me and there's going to be this pressure and I don't want that. Or I just feel like I'm going to be a loser if I fail, so I don't want to do this. Whatever the fear is, I started doing this in my 20s because I was so insecure and felt like I didn't mean anything. I didn't matter, that I wasn't able to do anything and no one was going to accept me and I wouldn't belong because if I failed, then people wouldn't love me and like me and therefore I'm not enough. So when I started to make a list of all my fears and actually go all in on them, public speaking, salsa dancing, opening up, being vulnerable, allowing people to see me for real for the first time, exposing my shame and my past pains, all these different things, I felt like my life would be over facing them. But instead, that's when my life really started to begin. It was when I faced all these fears, because it gave me a belief in myself that was authentic. Whereas prior, I was driven by a false sense of confidence, an inauthentic confidence that would get me external results, but made me feel like a liar to myself internally. And so therefore I still didn't have fulfillment and peace and harmony internally, even though I was creating externally big things in the world. And when I started this list and this experience, that's when I created a lot of humility in myself. That's when I said, oh, I don't know it all. I don't have all the answers. I'm not that good at everything. I'm actually terrible at a lot of things. And it gives me a lot of humility when you face them and you fail and you aren't good at these things for a long time. But when I am overcoming these fears, I gain confidence and I gain belief. Again, I believe self-doubt's the killer of all dreams. It's what holds us back. It doesn't matter how talented someone is. If they don't believe they can put their work out into the world, or if they're afraid of one of these three fears, and it causes them to doubt themselves, then their greatness will stay within them. They won't spread this with others. They won't impact people in a positive way because of this doubt and this fear. So when we get to the root of why we doubt ourselves, that's when we can start to overcome it.
And I've seen that firsthand, like that root of doubt. You know, I played on a college football team, and I worked my face off to be able to play as little or as much as I got to play. And there were people on the team that the coach is like, you need to work out. You need to go to class. You need to practice. And they'd go lift 300 pounds like that. Be like, what? I need to do this? Why? Look at me. I'm the best.
Right.
But they never went past that because they don't want to put in the work. So what would you say is the conversation around knowing that bravado and that confidence versus knowing that I do have this fear, I do doubt my opportunity, and what's the intersection with greatness? Are we innately great?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you a story. There was when I was in 8th grade, I went to a boarding school in St. Louis, Missouri, and I started to get pretty good at basketball around this time. So I was playing with the varsity, the high school team in 8th grade, just practicing with them. They were definitely better than me, but it was like I could kind of keep up with them. And so they used me as a practice player. There was this guy, but I looked up to them because I was still just a young 13-year-old playing against 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
There was a guy that I don't think I've ever seen to this day who was a better athlete than this guy on this varsity basketball team. He was a freak of nature and just gifted physically, shredded, muscular without having to work out, had a 45-inch vertical, just standing under the rim, just easily, effortlessly jumping. And he was dominant in practice. It was unbelievable just to watch him. It was like poetry on the basketball court. But for whatever reason, he couldn't put it together in a game. He really doubted his abilities when there was people watching, when there was stakes, when there was something on the line. And I was always like, why isn't this guy just taking over every game? And I never understood what it was specifically, but the more I thought about it over time, he didn't fully believe in his efforts. And here's the thing. It doesn't matter if the world tells you you're amazing. You've got this gift, you've got this talent, you've got to go do it. And everyone is supporting you and everyone's elevating you. That is useful and helpful. But if we don't learn to overcome the insecurity and the doubt within ourselves, it doesn't matter if the world is telling us, you're the best, go do this thing. We love you and accept you. If we don't learn to love and accept ourselves, it won't matter. But the other side is true as well. If the whole world is against you and doesn't believe in you, if you learn to believe and accept yourself and put yourself out there, you can create something beautiful, create something great in the world as well, and bring your gifts to the world. And I believe that greatness for me is inside of all of us 100%, but we've got to be willing to take on the action to overcome the things that hold it back from expressing it.
Yeah.
And greatness is not about, curing cancer or changing the world or something. For me, it's about discovering and developing unique gifts and talents inside of you to pursue something you feel called to do, a dream in your life, and making a positive impact on the people around you. And just doing that to your best of your abilities. For me, that's a beautiful, great thing. But when we are insecure around the fear of failure, fear of success, or the fear of judgment, and it causes us to not take action, then we're holding back our gifts, we're holding back our talents. And one of the beautiful things about you is you had this talent inside of you for a long time. But for whatever reason, you didn't think that you were capable of putting it out there. Maybe it was the fear of, well, people are going to judge me because I don't have a normal job, or I'm not making not doing the corporate thing, or I don't have steady income as an artist, or whatever it might be. Or maybe what happens if, I fail, then I'm just not going to believe in myself. Or what happens when I am successful, can I handle the pressure? I'm not sure which one it was for you. But there was something that was holding you back for a period of time, but you knew this was inside of you. And when you started to take the action on, okay, let me try this and try little by little and start putting it out there and start feeling the results I have from creating, expressing your talents, then you created a greatness game plan, a greatness mission, and you started to act accordingly based on these things. But we've all got to decide at some point, am I going to allow the fears and insecurities to hold me back? Or am I really going to make this season of life overcoming these fears and insecurities so they don't hold me back, but they actually become a superpower of mine? Because once you master the fear, it's like you can take on anything. And it becomes so much more powerful to have that skill of overcoming the fear than just hiding from it.
No, that's very true. And I can relate with that. It's like the fear of success doesn't really bother me. The fear of failing doesn't really bother me. I could tie those two as the more I fail, the closer I get to success.
Yes.
The more I succeed, so let me keep raising the bar. But that fear of judgment is huge.
Yeah. That's
You
for
know?
a lot of people. Yeah, that was mine as well.
And I think it stems to, I was the oldest child. So I had to be perfect. I had to be the good example. I had to get the good grade. Continuing moving down that path. So then, well, if I had to do that, it could back end into, well, if I have to be perfect, then I'm going to fail because no one can be perfect.
Right.
But it's not about failing. It's about the judgment around that. So constantly moving through that path and just allowing the world to dictate who I was supposed to be,
Yes.
but not in a bad way. Like my mom, my dad, they said, go be a doctor, go to school, go get good grades, because it's the right thing to do. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's not what I was supposed to be, you know? And then I did find my meaningful mission, right? We sat down, we had a coffee, led me down this path, and here we are. But what is it that you think, this is where we need to be careful, especially in our space, because I can get up and talk to artists and they're like, well, why aren't I you? Or what do I need to do? We have found our path. And it's really easy to start comparing people's greatness. Like, well, I'm not the president of the US. I'm not The Rock. I'm not Kobe.
Yeah.
How do we start really crafting that? Look, I'm going to be the best father I can be. And that's the greatest mission I ever need to be on.
Yeah, it's funny. I was watching John Legend last night, and I was at his concert here in LA, and I was like, this guy is so gifted and talented. And I was imagining myself, what would it have been like if I was a performer and a singer? I would never have his talent, or I couldn't sing like him, and I can't play piano like him, but I was just like, I wonder what that would be like. And instead of saying, I wish I'm not doing that, I just celebrated him for who he was and the gift that he created. I was like, it's so beautiful that I get to witness this and experience it. As opposed to saying, I wish I was playing in the NBA and being a piano and singer and an artist like you. Like, I'm not able to do all these things great and never going to be able to all of them do at the same time. So it's figuring out what season am I in. I had a season of playing sports was my main thing for a long time. And when I was in that season, I was obsessive about sports, about working out, about sleep, about recovery. That's all I thought about. I wasn't able to do a lot of other things really at a high level while trying to master that one thing. And as I transitioned into business and now into media and things like that, you know, I can have hobbies and interests and likes, but it's really hard to be great and express a creative endeavor at a high level in lots of different ways.
Yes.
I'm not saying it's not possible by the end of your life at some point. I look at guys like, you know, Jim Carrey, who's also a very talented painter and does like incredible art. And I'm like, this is unbelievable. But he's had a 40-year career where he was stand-up comedy to acting to artist to, you know, just overall entertainer. And it's evolved over time. And so he's able to marry all these different talents and gifts and express them in different ways now because he's at that season of life. So it's really knowing yourself, knowing what season you're in, and what your meaningful mission is for this season. I think it's hard because I want to do everything all at once, but I really try to focus on, narrow down on what is the thing that's going to get me the greatest impact. There's no right or wrong. I could do 5 things at once. I just may not get a lot of impact on any of them. And I just got to be okay with that.
Yeah. So picking 1 or 2 things, realizing that you have this whole life to live. We're allowed to have hobbies. You know, I put down the golf clubs because I knew I wasn't going to be as good as I wanted to be.
Right.
So I'm like, I'm getting rid of these things. I don't want to do it because I know me and I want to be great at everything. And that's something I'm not going to dedicate my time to. So as far as meaningful mission, I know that you started out with 100 million lives.
Yes.
Now that's boiled down to 100 million lives weekly.
Yes.
How do you stay true to that meaningful mission? And how does someone not get lost in comparison? Well, I'm not Lewis. I'm not going to impact 100 million lives.
I could easily get a comparison with other people in my industry who are reaching more people than me. And my ego wants to compare, but greatness wants to celebrate. And in the past, I used to be frustrated and angry if I wasn't creating what I saw other people doing that I wanted. Then 10 years ago, I really started to shift that and say, I'm just going to be in collaboration with everyone and celebrate people and elevate them. And usually when you shine the light on others, there's a reflection. and some of the light comes back and you have some awareness of what you're up to as well. And so I've been doing this for 10 years now of the podcast, and just trying to be in service to people with great wisdom to share. By doing that, it keeps me focused. And so I try to make decisions every year and based on future things that I feel like I got to serve that mission, that I got to bring that mission closer to me today. Mm-hmm. So it's measuring the efforts that we're doing as a team. It's measuring the things that I do and saying, okay, how many people are we impacting on a yearly basis, monthly, weekly basis? What are the decisions that are going to help us get there faster? Who do we need to hire on our team? What things are distractions and what things are actually supporting us in getting there faster? Mm-hmm. And it's just trying to be really good at making decisions of the efforts that will serve the mission and eliminating anything else that does not of service to that mission. And so a book may not seem like, well, how are you going to reach 100 million people in 1 week with a book? But a book for me is a culmination of 10 years of experiences from the show, and an opportunity to get it in front of people and promote something. Mm-hmm. Whereas media is really how you're going to hit people 100 million lives weekly. And it's how do you scale media faster, right? How do you scale audio and video faster? Yeah. So that's really where it is, but a book plays into promoting the media in a bigger way. So I'm just trying to be as more and more focused on the mission every year by building systems, team, processes, and being a better decision maker.
Mm-hmm. And all of that feeds into the one thing, that one meaningful mission, that one goal of where you're trying to go. Yes. And also the book, to me, it's like you've done the work for 10 years. Now you're sharing stories of greatness. So this is you now returning the service.
Yeah. This is the book that I wish I had when I was 16.
Yeah.
Or 21 or 30, when I was stuck or trying to figure out what is this mission that I'm on? What is this season of life that I'm doing? I'm in transition. I'm not sure. I'm doubting myself. This is what I wish I had and what I was looking for. Mm-hmm. So that's essentially what I did for 10 years, is ask people, how did you overcome self-doubt? How did you overcome these things? How did you get clear? How did you build confidence within yourself? Because I feel like that's the thing that if people learned how to do, it would help them unlock whatever they wanted to inside of them. And this is the book that I wish I had first for me. This is like prequel to my other books. And it's the book that I'm glad I'll get to read myself in 10 years when I'm in some other transition and helping me guide myself in getting clear. Because it's not about me, it's about everyone I've interviewed who are experts in backing the research and the science of how to overcome the doubt and get clear on your mission. So for me, this is the guidebook, again, that I wish I had 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and I'm glad I have now.
Yeah, no, you did 10 years of work. I remember episode 1.
Yeah.
I remember you saying, look, I'm going to start this thing, a podcast. This would be called the School of Greatness. Mm-hmm. And how you came up with the name. You're just like, this is what, if I had something like this, I'm going to create it.
Yeah.
And where is it that a lot of people talk about what they're going to create, what they're going to do, and they don't do it?
Yes.
And we love to either commiserate, hang out with like-minded, be a little victim-y about it, or martyrhood. But really taking action, I feel. People just don't take action as often as they want. They want to just point the finger. And I think the biggest difference with people that are showing up great are they're taking action. And they're doing it one day at a time, one step at a time. And who cares what happens at the end of the end? But
yeah, it's really the consistency of being proud of what you're putting out there consistently. Again, for me, as I look back on 10 years, I didn't miss a week for 10 years of showing up. Even when I didn't feel my best, even when I was tired, or even when I didn't want to do it, I still showed up. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean every episode was my best episode ever or the best content ever, but I learned from every episode. And I built incredible confidence in myself by being able to show up consistently. For me as a decathlete in college, I never felt like I was the best. I might have been able to get to the national championships in one event, maybe, but I knew I wouldn't have been able to win.
Yeah.
If I just specialized in the javelin, I think I could have actually gotten to the qualified for national championships. But I knew I wasn't going to get there in high jump or long jump or any of these other events. But putting them all together, 10 different events, I was pretty good at a lot of them. Mm-hmm. And when I put them all together consistently it could get me to a level of the national championship and being an All-American. And it was just the consistency of doing them all really well that got me the results. But if I would have said, well, I'm never going to be the best at one thing, so I might as well just not do it. I realize as a podcast host, it's not about just doing one thing. It's about doing lots of things really well, consistently. You know, pre-producing, producing, interviewing, prepping, post-editing, booking. It's like building the relationship before the show. It's building the relationship after the show. There's so many things that come into, you know, being a good podcast or making a podcast successful. And it's not just about, well, I'm a great interviewer. That's really not what it is. And I'm never going to be the number one interviewer of all time. There's tons of great people that can do better interviews than me, that are more prepared. But if you string all the things together that are needed and you just do it consistently for 10 years every week, good things tend to happen. And I think that's where people got to look at their strengths and go back into looking in the mirror and saying, what is my strengths? And maybe I'm not the best at one thing, but if I can put a lot of things together, I can be really great at those things together.
No, consistency is the thing that always tends to show up. You know, I look at your work, I look at what you've been doing. I look at episode 1, I look at who you are right now. I've told you this. I'm like, I have seen you grow. I have felt you grow. I feel the difference energetically, you know, and I feel compelled to share that every time I'm with you. And at the end of the day, I remember the first time I painted love. I look at it now, I kind of cringe a little. I'm like,
the first one. It was 10 years ago, right?
It was. It wasn't the greatest thing. It was like, it was cool. It was what it was now. But now it's the same thing.
You still have that first one?
Exactly. I do.
Where is it?
I have a few of them. There's one hanging in my house.
No way.
Yeah.
The first time you did it, was it on a canvas?
It was on a canvas. And I have a bunch of little ones that I've started with lowercase only. I started with all caps.
Yeah, I got to get one of these. I got to get one of these. I got to get an OG signed and have that framed for myself.
Yeah. I've got the all caps. We've different ways of doing it.
I like it.
Execute. But it was always on black and it was always on white and it was always the colors. So, and just looking at it over time, and again, back to the self-doubt or the beat up or the I'm not good enough or comparing myself to other artists or places, not in so much exactly what I'm doing, but it's like, what level are they at? And like, are we there? Am I not there? But what's going to get me there?
You'll never be at someone else's level, but you'll always be at your level. And so it's just appreciating the level and the season you're at and working towards the vision you have. And I think a lot of people look at other people's success and say, I want that, as opposed to getting clear on exactly what their vision is. And what does that success mean if you accomplished their success as opposed to defining what yours is? For me, I realized like early on, why am I doing the thing that I'm doing? There's an ego involved in all of us. And the ego is like, well, it'd be great to be a New York Times bestseller. It'd be great to be on top of the charts and to be noticed as like a top host and to have a talk show. And it's like, okay, the ego wants to be acknowledged. The ego wants to be loved and seen and celebrated by all, or at least by the people around us. And specifically people in our industry and our peers. That's the ego that wants that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think that's fine. But when we're driven by that, that's a slippery slope. And there's never enoughness. It's always like, okay, like I'm on the cover of Success Magazine right now. We were talking about this before. And that would have been a dream 10 years ago, right? And it's a cool moment, but I feel like I'm just so focused on the mission that I'm like, it hasn't really sunk in that my like 15-year-old self would have been like, this is crazy, right? But I'm also just like, as long as this serves the mission and whatever this does, if it helps the mission, awesome. Me being on a cover is cool, but it's not as fulfilling anymore as getting a text message like I did the other week. Do you know Scott Budnick? Scott Budnick, he was a producer of a bunch of big Hollywood movies. And his mission is really to help men in prison now, you know, who have been wrongfully convicted, but also men who've done some horrible, extreme murders and bad things, helping them transform in prison. I think there's over 2 million men in prison in America right now. And so almost every weekend he's in a prison working with men, helping them transform and helping them improve their life. And he sent me a message a couple of weeks ago from a guy who's been in solitary confinement for 2 years. So you get an hour a day outside, and the rest of the time you're alone in a cell.
Imagine 2 years by
2 years.
yourself, though.
He said he met the guy a couple of years ago in prison. When he met him, he was a part of a white gang in prison with a swastika tattooed on his chest. This guy had a lot of hatred, anger, pain, resentment, fear in his emotions and tied to his nervous system. It caused him to get into prison and make poor decisions to be in a white gang, which got him into solitary confinement because of the fights, all these things. A year and a half ago during COVID, I did a live stream to all the prison cells. They had like a live stream programming during this time. And I talked about The Mask of Masculinity, this book that I wrote, to help men heal and learn about the different masks we put on to fit in and belong in society. And typically we do that because we don't fit in and belong to ourselves. We don't accept who we are internally. We haven't learned to be a good friend, be a good parent to our inner child, essentially. And so we do things to feel safe and protected and liked by others, like joining a gang or getting a tattoo of a swastika to fit in, to belong to some type of belief and feel safe and protected. So I get this text 2 weeks ago from Scott, who sends me a photo in the text of a handwritten letter, a 6-page letter that this inmate sent him. And he sent in this letter, and I ended up reading the whole thing, but to paraphrase it, he said, I dropped out of the gang. And when Scott, my friend, asked him why, he said, Lewis Howes and The Mask of Masculinity. I watched, and he wrote this whole letter saying, I watched him talk about his experience, his beliefs growing up as a man, what caused him to cause harm on himself and others and do things that he wasn't proud of. We got access to the book in prison. I've read the book 4 times now. This was all in the letter.
Yeah.
And he's like, I dropped out of the white gang. I feel a lot more peaceful. And I continue to learn about why I got myself in this situation. So again, I'm not saying like the things he did were okay and making it right, but to see someone do a bad thing, face it, own it, take responsibility, and say, I want to transform from the inside out. Even though he's still in solitary confinement, he's starting to be free internally. And I think that's one of the biggest things. There was a lot of emotionally imprisoned human beings who are not behind bars.
Who are walking around, quote unquote, free.
Exactly. But they're in emotional prisons. And, you know, there are some people behind bars that are still in emotional prisons, but some who have learned how to heal and mend. And I think that's one of the keys, is learning how to drop the ego from protecting us and needing to look like we're the best or number one or the greatest. And when I started to shift, I'm not a perfect human, you know, my ego is still there, but when I started to shift ego to service and thinking, how can I make this about the mission? How can I make this? Yes, I want to celebrate myself and the accomplishments and being on the cover of New York Times, great. It's not discounting your success, but it's also being in service to the mission more. And when we can be in service more to our mission, then we can manage our ego better, as opposed to be driven by that like need to look good and be right and be the best. And so it's not discounting your success and what you've created, acknowledge it, and have humility within your service.
No, totally. Thank you for sharing that. There's a few things in there. Number one, the cover of Success magazine. It's an amazing accomplishment. That's a byproduct. That's a result of you being stuck on your mission. And we realize it. Like, let's use training, for example. I train, I eat well. The 6-pack is a byproduct. If you train for the 6-pack, your body's not healthy. Right. You're doing it the wrong way, which is similar to what me have done in the past. For example, when I did really well and made a lot of money, I wasn't enough or good enough or thought I wasn't enough, because we're all enough innately.
Yes.
And I had to go buy the diamond watches and the 26-inch rims and the new Escalade and every shoe under the sun, because that's how I was showing the validation that I am successful. That fed the ego.
Yes.
You know, so I could relate in so many of those things. Now, going into this prison story, 5 years ago, I did a project at a prison. And later I was able to speak to the men. We did a mural with them.
That's beautiful.
And these were
I remember
murders.
this. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you were in there a couple weeks
This is
before.
Lancaster, right?
Yeah. This is Lancaster. You had signed the hats and they had me sign the hats. I sent you the photo.
Yeah.
But that leads me with this story and moving forward, like this man that changed his life. And I was posing the question because society is harsh to judge. So he changed.
Yes.
He's done the work, but he's still scarred by the past. Now, how do we do the work to not let the judgment of the world affect us choosing to win and to be great and to forgive ourselves moving forward?
This was the hardest work for me, and it's been a journey, and it's really, it wasn't until the last 2 years where I feel like I've had a better understanding of managing and healing the past in a deeper way in all aspects of me. Because shame is a scary thing that can hold us all back.
Yeah.
It can weigh us down in a big way. And on page 201, if you want to open it up on page 201, I'll show you. There's a diagram that talks about the difference between the powerless mindset versus the greatness mindset. And when we feel fearful or powerless or being held back in some way, we are living in a powerless mindset. I think there's like 5 or 6 characteristics. And one of them is concealing past pains in the powerless mindset. That means shame, insecurity, things you feel guilty, things you feel bad about. When we conceal those things, it has power over us because we're afraid if someone heard this, they wouldn't like me or accept me.
Yeah.
So that concealing of a shame or an insecurity, I'm not saying you need to broadcast to the world or on your social media, but can you talk openly to the people you care about the most from your past pains? If not, doesn't make you bad or wrong. It just means there's something that has power over your energy from taking action in a more authentic way.
So can we lessen the impact or control that it has over us?
100%. And when I started to reveal all my past pains and doing it in the most intimate way to the most intimate of people, friends and family and partners. And when I was able to do that, it was able to set me free emotionally from that. Now it takes practice, it takes integrating, it takes time to feel to do it and feel freedom consistently. But the more I did it, the less it had power over me from that one thing. So that one thing doesn't make me feel powerless anymore. And then if you go down each one of the things, if you're lacking a meaningful mission, then you're just disempowered. It doesn't mean you're not a fun, loving person. You're not a good person with good intentions. It doesn't mean you're bad and wrong. It just means you're not able to elevate at the highest level of your potential right now when you lack a meaningful mission. Think about it. If you're like, I have no clue what I want to do in my life, I'm just going to wander. You're just going to be
complacent.
Yeah, you're going to be complacent. Mediocre. You're going to be like taking the scraps of life. People are going to be pulling you everywhere. You're not going to be clear.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. And it's just going to be less empowering. Unless you say, my meaningful mission is to be in a season of adventure and nothingness. Cool. At least you're clear that I'm going to travel. I'm going to adventure. I'm just going to do all my hobbies for 3 months. I'm not going to have a plan. At least now you have a game plan. It's like you have a mission that you need a season of recovery. You need a season of rest. Cool. That's awesome. You're clear. And live in that space. So when you conceal past pains, when you allow fear to hold you back, your self-doubt to hold you back.
The opinions of others to guide you.
Yes. And when your opinions of others, the judgments of others to guide you, you're in a powerless mindset. And the reverse of that is the greatness mindset. When you're driven by a meaningful mission, when you reveal past pains, when you overcome self-doubts.
You have control of your own identity.
When you create a healthy identity. You and I created a contract with our identity 10 years ago. And before we created a signed contract that we said, maybe I'm not here right now, but I believe I can step into this. That shifted our identities with ourselves, not with other people, but with ourselves. And most people don't know what their identity is, but if they recorded all of their thoughts and played it aloud, that would be your identity. Oh, I'm never good enough. I'm stupid. I'm an idiot. Why did I do that? I'm such an idiot. What was I thinking? I'm never going to look as good as him or her. Oh man, I didn't show up today for my workout. I'm such a failure. If we recorded these things, our internal dialogue, and played it aloud, they would send us to a mental institution.
Oh, yeah.
We would go to some type of like lockup, put me in a straitjacket. And imagine if we said this to other people. We wouldn't have any friends. If we spoke this way to someone else with the narrative we give ourselves, with the identity we have defined for ourselves from our self-talk, no one would want to spend time with us.
No.
So why do we want to spend time with us when we do this to ourselves? You don't want to. You feel like you're not enough. It goes back to the root of I am not enough.
And we fill the void with everything else, or filling it with friends or partying or whatever the case is.
To try to mask the pain, numb the pain of not feeling good enough or not feeling pretty enough or smart enough or wealthy enough or whatever, the comparison game. And so when we learn and take a look in the mirror and say, okay, I've been doing this for most of my life. Beating myself up more for this will not support me and will not empower me to move forward. So let me forgive myself for all this pain I've caused to me. Let me fully forgive. I can even be sad and I can grieve. Man, I really hurt myself and I wasn't even aware of it. But now that I'm aware, let me be sad. Let me grieve this pain that I've gone through, that I've caused myself. And let me forgive and accept this is what I've done in my life. This is what others have done to me. I don't have to like it. They could be horrible, but me not accepting it is going to disempower me. So let me accept it all. And now I'm aware of it. I can still be sad. I can still be upset and frustrated, but I got to at least accept it if I want to step into greatness. When I accept it, now that I'm aware that I've been speaking this way to myself, that I've been doing these things, that I've been out of integrity, that I've hurt myself. Now let me create a new contract with me. This is something you and I did almost 10 years ago. We created a contract with ourselves, a healthy identity that we want to step into and become. You can't create an identity that you don't believe in. So I was a fun-loving guy, but anger was my trigger. Anger was inside of me. Resentment was inside of me. So I could still be fun and loving, but when I was triggered, the wound was anger, was frustration, was feeling stupid, and all these different things that I believed.
You would use that as like a catalyst.
And I would use it, and I'd be driven by the wound. And the wound, when you hit the button, boom, okay, now the frustration comes out, the feeling stupid and insecure comes out. And now I got to make sure that everyone sees that I'm not those things from a wound. And so when I created my contract with myself, I said, okay, what's something that is true about me that is not something where I'm going to fake it and hope I become it, but actually I need to face it and embrace it. A lot of people say fake it till you make it. I think facing it until you embrace it and becoming it. And so I said, I am a loving, passionate, wise man.
Yes, you are.
Thank you. I know. And when I said that to myself, I believed it. And because I didn't say I'm a smart man, because at the time I didn't think I was smart. So I couldn't fake it. I couldn't say I'm like this highly intelligent, smart man. That didn't resonate with me authentically. But wisdom did. I did have a lot of wisdom. I had a lot of experience. I had a lot of street smarts. So I felt wise. And so I stepped into wisdom, even though smart didn't resonate with me 10 years ago. And so I created a new healthy identity that I embodied anytime I felt a trigger that was still coming up. I would step into that identity and I would repeat it the way you've repeated yours. What's your contract?
I'm a loving, courageous, vulnerable man.
Yes, you are.
Thank you. I know.
And when we step into this, and we don't have to say this to others, but when we embody it for ourselves, that allows us to overcome the negative self-talk, the negative critic that typically controls most of us and drives most of us, and instead being a positive self-coach. You know, the greatest athletes in the world didn't get to the top with bad coaches. They had great coaches.
Yeah.
And when they got to the top, they didn't say to, you know, their coach, I'm good. I think I'm going to win this championship next year by myself. Like, I'm good. I don't need you anymore. Right. Thanks for getting me here, but I'm good now. Now that I've won,
I'm out.
I have all the skills. I can do this on my own. They actually said, oh, let me find more great coaches in different ways of giving me feedback to improve my deficiencies and help me stay on top. And I think it's wise to enlist support. It's one of the things I talk about in the book at the end, is like really enlisting support. That doesn't mean you have to pay for coaches, although that's what I like to do to have that skin in the game. But finding a personal advisory board of friends, peers, mentors, family to continue to guide and coach you in improving the different areas of your life. So this healthy identity and all these other things in the greatness mindset will support you in overcoming it.
No, it's a beautiful thing, and it's true. And even contracts can be seasonal, right?
Yes.
If we start owning the contract we became for whatever reason, maybe we have a subcontract to go a little deeper,
Exactly.
or go a little bit different. But there's also one other thing that you really talk about is asking courageous questions. And that is probably a catalyst to really start diving into the work. What's the question you need to ask yourself to realize, like, am I in a shame cycle? Am I just hating myself? Like, what is it that I'm really trying to do? Because I think a lot of times I didn't know what I was running away from.
Yeah.
I was depressed. I was successful. I'm single. I'm in LA. I've got good genetics. Like, why don't I want to get out of bed? Why don't I want to live life? And that's not a strong enough question. I had to really go in there and ask. And like, oh, I didn't love myself. I didn't think I was worthy. I was constantly chasing perfection, and it's the fear of what people judged or thought about me. Now start unpacking. It's like, and that's a long cycle.
Yeah.
You know, I always tell people, doing the work, we're going to a mental gym. Just like I'm flexing my bicep, I got to keep working on this heart muscle, because I'm a very reactionary, defensive person. And for the longest time, it's like, boom, tone, boom, reaction. I'm like, later, I'm like, why did I do that? They weren't doing that to me. It's
What's the root?
It's what did I bring into the conversation in
And
that
how,
moment?
and how is that serving your meaningful mission? Those reactions, are they actually in service to you accomplishing what you want?
Not at all.
And if they're not, then you have to ask yourself, well, why am I reacting? Why am I triggered? When I'm actually not being physically attacked, if you're in physical attack mode and someone's coming at you, then okay, be on alert, be in reaction, scream, get someone away from you, whatever you got to do. But if it's an emotional trigger and there's no physical threat, that means there's a wound that's still open inside of you. And a wound that doesn't heal is always going to hurt. It's always going to sting. It's going to be irritating. And so does that irritation serve a mission of yours? If it doesn't, then we must learn how to mend that wound and create new meaning from that emotional or psychological wound. I'm not saying that it wasn't painful and it wasn't sad and upsetting and all these things, but it happened. And so we've got to create new meaning so that we are using it in service to us, not holding us back.
Or it's in service to hurting other people.
Yes, exactly.
So one of the things, I have conversations with people like, oh, I wish I never dated that person, or I wish I never did that. Like, if we look at it that way, then we're not going to move forward. But if we look at it as like, all the women I ever dated led me to my wife right now, and it made me the man I am to accept my wife when she presented herself.
That's what Martha says to me. She's like, I'm actually really glad of all the people you dated, because it brought you to the awareness, the humility you have now, and meeting me at this exact time. And if you wouldn't have experienced those things, we probably would have never met, and you wouldn't be the person you are. You wouldn't be as generous and giving to me.
We're in the right season.
At the right season, exactly. And so, yeah, I don't have any of the regrets from those things. I think I used to beat myself up and say, man, why did I stay so long on these things?
Oh, I've been there.
You know what I mean? Why did when I knew it wasn't the right thing, why did I stay another 2 years? Why did I stay another year? Why did, I used to be in beat up mode, but that doesn't serve me anymore either. So I accept where I was with the tools that I had, and now I have deeper wisdom. And again, that's why I'm a wise man.
Yeah.
Because of how all the mistakes I did make.
And that's the thing, we have to learn, we get to learn from those mistakes. We get to move forward. And if not, we're just sitting there in that same cycle.
Exactly.
Because I'll ask, like, why did I stay in that longer? Well, I didn't want to hurt the other person, but you're still hurting someone, and you're just hurting yourself.
100%.
And if you're hurting yourself, you're definitely hurting the other person.
Yep. Because you're not giving all of yourself.
Yeah. I mean, and we could go on that for days. We could go on that. So there's another thing we talk about a lot. It comes up a lot in our conversations, but it's not only just keeping your word, but being your word.
Yeah.
and being our word with ourselves, right? It's much easier to say, yeah, I'm going to be on time, or I got you and I'm going to show up. But how often do we break that word with ourselves? And what's
man.
the avalanche effect around that?
Yeah. I mean, when we're not our word to ourselves, it just, we lose confidence and belief in ourselves. And so in a world of, I mean, as human beings, we're always going to be out of integrity at some way, somewhere, some way.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean we need to be often, but it's, especially if you're living a big life, there's going to be moments of out of integrity. I mean, even today I was late. And for me, it's one of the things I hate more than anything is being late.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate that I get to renegotiate with people. And I think the thing is, if you don't communicate before you know, and you're just late, that doesn't work for me. So that's why I always communicate when I know I'm not going to be on time.
Yeah. Same.
And ask for a renegotiation essentially. But I never like it. The feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always got to get back on track when I'm out of integrity with my word and see how I can make up for it and how I can like get back in alignment of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's the key. When we're always out of our word to ourselves, or we're not renegotiating and creating a new commitment with that,
Mm-hmm.
then we lose credibility with ourselves and with others. And it's hard to do anything meaningful at a high level without credibility, without authority, without people being able to trust in you, be able to show up with whatever you commit to. And so that just is hard over time if that happens often. And again, if you can renegotiate, that's a different thing. But if you don't renegotiate and you just show up late constantly, or you just say, I forgot or whatever, then you lose credibility with yourself and with others.
Mm-hmm. And that's a great example because being late drives me bananas.
Yeah.
Specifically to myself because I can control that. It makes me anxious. It gets me nervous. I get there. I'm all flustered. I'm not in the space or the energy I want to be in. I just lose control. But renegotiating is a way to take that power back and say, hey, I know I'm going to be late. Forgive me. Is this okay? I'm giving you a heads up. And now we can kind of move forward all the way.
Exactly, yes.
But
so when you don't address it, that's when you lose credibility with yourself and others. And it's a disrespectful thing to someone else's time if you don't give them a heads up that you're not able to commit to something anymore. So, it's just being aware of that.
Mm-hmm. And I think most people don't realize that because I have friends, they're notoriously late. And I'm just like, I don't know if we can keep doing this.
I know.
It's like, I
It's
love
tricky,
you,
man.
but
It's tricky. It's tricky if that happens. Or you just know like that's who they are and you can only trust them to a certain extent based on their credibility. Or you can say, okay, this is who they are and I accept who they are, but I'm not going to do some big project with them because I can't rely on them with this.
Yeah.
They're a great friend when I can see them, if they show up ever. But if not, then it's not how I want to live my life. Or you can have a conversation with them too. And asking a courageous question is also confronting someone where there's something that's bothering you and saying, hey, I want to create a new relationship with us. I've noticed you've been late the last 10 times, or you've canceled on me the last 4 times, or you've backed out or whatever. And that's not the relationship I want to have with us moving forward. Just even saying that is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So asking her courageous questions, saying, what would it take for us to create a relationship moving forward from this point where both of us are giving our best to be early, if not on time? Or it's only extreme. If you can't come, don't commit and then back out later. You know, what would it take for us? That's a courageous question, confronting something that's uncomfortable. And when we do that, we can create stronger bonds. Or maybe that person doesn't like it and it's not the right person for you for this season. So it's just it's trying to eliminate as much friction that does not serve your harmony and peace inside, which therefore would not serve your meaningful mission.
And the key word there is reduce friction.
Yes.
Right? Because sometimes we think going through all that effort is going to cause more friction, more use of energy, but it really doesn't. The way you just explained is like, it's so much easier to do that than all the things we're saying in our heads, all the stories that we're creating.
Or wait another year of them like breaking their word over and over again and you being more frustrated and having an expectation, hoping that something's going to change, but you lacked the courage to communicate and ask another question.
And resentment fills in, and
Yeah.
all these other things fill in. Then you
Exactly.
go back to attacking yourself. and
Exactly.
moving on. So you've been doing this for 10 years now, and you're translating your show into multiple languages. You've gone around the world with this. Have you felt that how does the English American culture that we have in this translate to people in South America,
Yeah.
in Mexico, in a different language? Have you found that there's a gap, or it really does shift?
I mean, it's crazy because I launched our Spanish channel, I think, a year and a half ago. And it's almost like 630,000 subscribers, about 5 million views a month.
Wow.
So that's way faster than when I launched my English channel.
No, yeah.
Now, obviously, I have a bigger audience from English, so people are aware of it, and there's a ton of content that is out there now. So it's not starting from scratch with like one episode a week. It's like we're posting 3 times a week in Spanish. But there is such a hunger for personal growth and information and knowledge and wisdom from all these top experts that people see all over the world, but can't access the language. So again, this was just another unlock where I was like, okay, I saw Mr. Beast doing this like 2 years ago, and I was like, all right, if he's doing this, maybe it will translate in my industry as well. And so we launched with Portuguese, Spanish, and now Portuguese. And it's been a game changer. Again, reaching 5 million people a month in Spanish just on YouTube is powerful. And the engagement, like people are so thankful and grateful. And I feel like that's going to be the next wave. It's extremely expensive to dub at a high level of quality with 2 different voices for 2 hours long video. It's very expensive. And it's not like a profitable thing for the first 6 to 12 months. But I made decisions based on service, not on profit. And the mission, not on money. And by doing that, there's greater impact. And impact, money and profit and opportunities always follow when you're being of service to people. And so I had, the means to be able to invest back in that without making money right away. And it's been a beautiful thing. When I go to Mexico City, people will come up to me on the streets running and show me the video, and they're watching the interviews right then on their runs or their walks, and they're like thanking me for translating it into Spanish. When you get clear on your mission, then you start to ask different questions around what would I need to do to get there faster? What is something I haven't done yet that I can try? And not everything is going to work out. Maybe this would have failed, but it ended up working. So now we're going into other languages.
Yeah, and then it's opportunity to impact a world that not only they wish they lived in America,
Exactly.
right? As much as we hear people talk bad about this, if you travel, if you talk to people in other countries,
Dream of visiting for a week.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? I was in Spain years ago playing handball, and a couple of guys on my team were like, it would be a lifelong dream to visit Los Angeles. What's it like living there? And, these people that are like, it would just be a dream to go for a few days and just experience America. In South America, a lot of people think the same way. Now, it doesn't mean there's a lot of people that want to stay in their country and love their country as well, but they want to have the options to travel and do these things. But bringing people access that can't travel to this wisdom and to these interviews, for me, I feel like I'm grateful that I get to do it.
Yeah. No, it's a great opportunity. And being in service, I have found, is absolutely the most fulfilling, the best form of payment I've ever received in my life.
Yes.
With no expectation.
Yes.
So where does love fall into the constructs of greatness?
Well, we did an amazing collab with Love and Greatness on your sweatshirt.
Yeah.
So I just feel like you can't do anything great without fully loving yourself and loving your craft and loving the world. And learning how to open your heart. With a closed heart, you can only go so far. With an open heart, you can really transform and impact the people around you in a beautiful way. And so I think life is going to be a process of constantly keeping my heart open, even when adversity, challenges, pain, suffering occurs, either close to me, around me, or in the world. And that's one of the hardest things. I've had a couple of male friends who have passed away in the last 2 months. That has been sad. It's been very sad to experience this, and to know their hearts and to see them pass is very sad for me. And that sadness could cripple me if I didn't have emotional tools on how to experience and feel the wide range of emotions, I don't want to shut down sadness or pain or grief, but how can I experience it and not allow it to keep me stuck? How can I experience it and then also experience extreme gratitude and love and beauty from the sadness? And how can I have a moment of reflection and say, man, this life is short, or this tragedy happened, or the earthquakes or mass shootings, like all this stuff is really sad and tragic. And I could get really guarded or cynical because of what I see and witness and experience. But instead, I choose to create the meaning and interpretation around the sadness, around these events, around these deaths, around these different things, and say, man, time is limited. How can I open my heart more, knowing that this could all be over at any moment? How can I keep it open and experience love, appreciation, gratitude, and fulfillment from how I'm showing up in my way of being on a daily basis towards my mission?
Yeah.
And that awareness gives me a lot of peace within the sadness and keeps me open to love consistently. But I also have emotional coach and coaches that support and guide me, that if I ever feel like I'm in a funk, they can, give me a tool, an exercise, a reminder, a release, so I can get back into harmony of love.
No, and that awareness, the practice, whether you have a coach, you could easily have these moments that lean you toward fear, and then we start reacting, or they lean us toward love and we start responding.
That's it.
So final question. Thank you again for everything. How do you define living a life through love?
It's kind of everything that we've talked about all in one, where it's really accepting and loving all of your past from your first memory until now. Can you go back? I don't think you can live a life forward of love unless you go back and love all of yourself in the past. So it's going back to your first memories. And every painful, challenging, sad, scary, unfortunate memory that you had from your first until now, and saying, I love and accept all the parts of me in the past, and I love accepting who I am now, and I love and accept my future. I feel like that's how you live a life through love, by fully integrating all of your past into your present and drawing your future closer to you now, through doing the future in service to love.
Wow. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
No, taking inventory, taking ownership, and realizing that is the path forward.
Yeah.
Be present, and we'll see where we end up.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for everything.
Thanks, brother. Love you, brother.
Love you too. I appreciate you so much. You are the embodiment of greatness. And I thank you, because here I am today, because you took a stand for me in that moment. From there, I obviously had to make the choice. There's only so much we can do for
You had to
people.
act consistently. Yeah.
Yeah, but still, you kept showing up for me.
I saw the greatness in you, man.
You did.
I saw the gift in you. I'm glad you took action and were consistent, because it's the consistency that's what pays off. You could do one thing and then stop and never know what could have happened, but you've been consistent. It's amazing to watch, man.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you, brother. Love you, man.
And where can everyone find you?
School of Greatness podcast, the Greatness Mindset book, and Lewis Howes anywhere on social media.
We'll link it all up.
Thanks, man.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Live Through Love. If you love this episode, you'll love this episode.